First, let me just tell you that I am Art Taylor, and I have the distinct honor of being the chair of the board of Convergence. And I want to start the meeting off by just thanking all of you for joining and welcoming you to this meeting of this Leadership Council. And we're very glad that you're here. And I hope that all of you are well. I wanted to start off with a few housekeeping notes. We will be recording the session so that we can share it on our websites for all of those who aren't able to attend. They can see it in the public as well. If you need captions, there is a live transcript also available. And during the program, if you'd like to comment or raise a question, we encourage you to use the hand feature, which can be found by clicking the React button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, or you can actually use the chat. Now, I know the election is on everybody's mind, and we're going to have some time, obviously, to talk about that because I know that there are lots of feelings and things that we're sensing as a result of the election, so we want to make sure that we make time for that. But to start us off, especially given that Thanksgiving is upon us, we thought we would ask all of you as a warm-up to please share your name and information and your location and something you're feeling grateful for. Just share that in the chat, if you don't mind. Just what your name and location is and something you're feeling grateful for. And we do this at home at our Thanksgiving dinner. And every once in a while, there's a person who just kind of sits there, and I say to them, does that mean you don't have anything to be grateful for? So I know we're all Convergence people, so I know that we all have something to be grateful for, and it would be wonderful to see what you're all grateful for. Now, while you're doing that, I wanted to also just let you know what you're going to be experiencing today. We're going to have an update on the state of Convergence with Mariah Levison, who is our CEO. And she's going to also talk about the pipeline of projects. And she'll be sharing that idea, that pipeline of projects, with Senior Director of Programs, Monica Glowacki. And also, you're going to have a chance to reflect on the election, as I mentioned, and its implications for Convergence. And notice how I framed that: reflect on the election and its implications for Convergence in smaller breakout groups. Now, this won't be just a wide-ranging conversation about the election, but we want to know how it affects Convergence, and we'll do that in breakouts. You'll also hear about Convergence's theory of change and the impact work coming out of our collaboratives on support for working families and social factors of health from Mariah and project director and board member Stuart Butler. So I'm going to turn it over to Mariah, but before I do that, I would love to hear from just a couple of you about what you're grateful for. Is there anyone, can we just turn off that and just see if anyone's willing to share something that they're actually grateful for with the whole group? Okay, I'm going to do like I do at Thanksgiving when no one wants to say.
Looks like Rachel. Yeah.
Rachel, go ahead.
I will share. I recently, in the last 6 months, moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and am just both tremendously grateful for the move here. It turned out to be better than I could have imagined. For my home, for incredible friendships, and for a new business that is being launched. So lots to be grateful for. That supports people, business that supports people.
Very well, thank you. And it looks like David.
Hi, and this is my first Convergence event. I'm really pleased to be part of this. I live in Tucson, Arizona. I work for one of our local elected officials, and I'm really grateful to live in a community where lots of parts of the community have come together to support early childhood education. So scholarships for families to be able to access quality early childhood education is something our community has really rallied behind from all segments of the community.
Great. Thank you. And let's see. Anybody else? Roxy?
Yeah, yeah, I can't find my hand up on my page. Yes, I just, I put it in the chat and I'll say it again. I live in Brevard, North Carolina, only 30 miles from Asheville. And so I am extremely grateful that our home was unscathed. Somehow a miracle, it went over our house. And that my neighbors are okay and my family is okay. But we have a long, long, long road of recovery here in Western North Carolina. So I'm very grateful for the fact that I was spared.
I'm happy for you, Roxy, and we all think a lot about what's happening in your community as a result of those storms. So I'm glad that you're okay. How about one more before we turn it over to Mariah?
Mary
one.
Jo.
I'll
Yeah.
do one.
Okay,
This
go
is
ahead.
Mary Jo McGuire.
Okay.
I'm looking for my hand raised too here. I should
Yeah.
know where it is faster. So Mary Jo McGuire from Minnesota. And we do this at Thanksgiving also. So I'm grateful that we're doing that. We like to go around and hear from everyone. And it gives us time to reflect. I am grateful for all of you and for Convergence right at this moment to help us process this past election and what's going on with our country. And just the ability to work on that together, to move forward in a positive way, to help us find ways to come together. So I'm feeling grateful for Convergence and organizations like Convergence to, although there's no one really like us, but to just be able to move forward.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Well, thank you. Well, Mariah, we're going to turn it over to you, but I want to just offer this. Another group that I'm associated with had a gathering recently where they tried to forecast what may be happening in the next 10 years. And what they suggested is that we're going through what's known as an uncanny valley. And that imagery might be a little challenging, so I came up with my own imagery. And the theme that they built this whole conference around was technology, but it can be applied to the broader society. So if you think about uncanniness in technology, you think about R2D2. R2D2 was a fun, friendly, technological support bot, or if you wanted to call it a robot. And we loved R2D2. But then there's Chucky, the horror character. We're afraid of Chucky. I don't like Chucky. He scares me. He makes me uneasy. And what we're all trying to figure out is, are we trying to build Chucky with our technology, or are we trying to build R2D2? And the same can be true with society. You know, we're heading maybe into something that many of us feel might be Chucky. Maybe others feel is closer to R2D2. But it's uncanny for many of us. It's an uncanny time. And what we're trying to figure out is how we get through it. I happen to believe that one of the ways we get through it is by supporting efforts like Convergence that are working to help those who are feeling this uncanniness get through it, but also helping those who feel that they have what they need to support others to lend some of that as well. And so with that thought, I want to turn it over to Mariah, who's doing her best to help us get through whatever uncanniness that we're feeling. Mariah, thank you.
Thanks, Art. And thanks everyone for being here. One of my staff gave me trouble in the chat for saying that the thing that I was grateful for was being here with all of you and called me cheesy. And maybe I am, but I really am so grateful to be here with all of you. It has been a challenging time in many ways. And for me, I think the most grounding thing is to really connect with the people who I care about and who I'm in this work with. So that's my kids and my family, that's the wonderful staff here at Convergence and our board and our leadership council. So I really am so grateful to be here with all of you today. And I love gratitude practices as well. And I love Thanksgiving for that. And my kids and I make this gratitude tree that I love. So I find all of this helpful, and I'm so grateful to have you all here today. And I just have to shout out that I see quite a few Minnesotans on this call, and that makes me really happy too. For those of you who don't know, I'm based in Minnesota, and that's where I am coming to you from today. So many of you have, advised us and sought out opportunities for Convergence, made connections for us, supported us financially, and in so many ways year over year. So as someone who maybe could only run Convergence of all things because it is really my style to lead through collaboration, I am so grateful for the commitment of all of you who are on this call today. You may or may not know that Convergence is quite a small team. It's really 10 core staff. We have some other people involved in other ways, but 10 core staff. And so it's really because of the ways that we're able to leverage this really dedicated community, our leadership council, our board, and others, that we're able to take on as much as we do. And I'm going to go over what we take on, and I think it's quite a lot. So we'll see what you think about that. Just quickly, for any of you who are new to us on the call today, I am Mariah Levison. I'm our CEO, and my whole background is in this work around consensus building, which I've done at the local, state, and national level. And that is Convergence's core mission as well. Convergence was founded in 2009, and since that time has focused on tackling the nation's toughest challenges by building trust and relationships, which is so key to the work that we do. And I think, as you will get the feel during this meeting as well, and forging consensus solutions that foster unlikely alliances for action at the national, state, and local levels. I've been in this role of the CEO now for a little over a year, and I am truly more energized than ever by the direction that we're taking and the progress that we're making. We have several of our flagship Convergence collaboratives going on across our impact areas. Those are the areas that we focus on, which include economic opportunity, democracy and civic engagement, and health and well-being. And we have now extended our mission, which was a huge undertaking and change for us, to launch our Convergence Learning Lab, where we work to inspire and equip other leaders and doers and to bring these approaches of collaborative problem solving to their communities and their institutions. So I'm very excited to share with you today some of the updates on our work and where we are and the advances that we're making. We always somehow make it the case that we talk more than we want to, and we really want to be hearing from you. But I'm going to take a few minutes to ground you in the work and where we are, and then we'll have many points during the afternoon for discussion, but we'll try to get to those as quickly as we can. But a couple of updates. On the collaborative side of our work, we received additional funding for an implementation phase of one of our collaboratives, our Supports for Working Families collaborative. You're going to hear a lot more about that later today, but it's been one of the more challenging aspects of our work is to get those consensus solutions implemented. And so having a funded period of that work dedicated to the implementation phase is something that we're really excited about and that we're going to talk about more later. An additional sort of follow-on to our National Families Collaborative work is that we have a project in the state of Kentucky that has taken on a piece of that national collaborative, which focused on a wide variety of supports for working families, one of which is childcare. And in wonderful partnership with the wonderful Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, we have a collaborative there to advance access to high-quality childcare in the state of Kentucky. We're really excited about the project. There's a recognition there that it's a real challenge. There is a real shortage, and it creates real workforce participation challenges, among others. And in fact, the Kentucky legislature is teed up to receive our solutions from the group. Many members of the group were able to testify to the committee that oversees children and families there, and have a conversation with them about how they're looking for more consensus solutions on the way forward. So we're really excited about that project. We're also really excited that we recently released our Convergence Collaborative on Social Factors of Health Blueprint for Action, entitled Health Starts Here. You're going to hear more about that from our illustrious longtime board member and project leader, Stuart Butler. That project is moving into its implementation phase, so we're going to hear about what that looks like in our session today around implementation. And then I mentioned that we have launched our Learning Lab. And our Learning Lab is a set of trainings and customized engagements to bring these tools to places where we're hearing lots of need and lots of interest in them from government associations, institutions of higher education, and even the private sector. One of the cornerstone aspects of that Learning Lab is our Convergence Compass, which is our name for an e-learning course that we've been in the process of building. And if you've never done that before, let me tell you, it is a tremendous undertaking. So working to develop all of that content and working with the vendor to develop a really engaging e-learning program is a big investment that we've made that's going to come to fruition this spring. We've done it in partnership with two excellent partners, the Constructive Dialogue Institute and the Greater Good Science Center. And we're pretty confident that it'll be the only program of its kind that will kind of go from soup to nuts on how do you resolve contentious public or community issues. It'll cover the psychology of conflict, strategies for effective dialogue, and how to do collaborative problem solving. So we're excited that that e-learning will be available sort of just in time for people to use whenever they feel the need and want to engage. And that's a real benefit of e-learning. But we also know that the most robust learning will come from people being together in person or online, having a chance to practice and dig into the skills. And so for that reason, the e-learning will also be at the foundation of other training formats that we'll use. One will be a collaborative problem solving cohort, which will be launching the first one kind of in the summer of 2025 with the support of the JAMS Foundation. And we'll be partnering with the National Association of Counties. A shout out to Mary Jo McGuire, who is on the call and is the immediate past president and helped us establish that partnership. So we'll have a handful of county commissioners from around the country who will participate in taking the e-learning, as well as a really robust experience of synchronous time with a trainer, practicing and applying these skills to address real divisive issues in their communities. Through our Learning Lab, we've also taken on some engagements with a number of partners, including New York University, the Chicago area Oak Park School District, to address division regarding the response to the conflict in Israel and Palestine, and are having conversations with other universities, coalitions, and businesses. We're going to be really leaning into something that we started this year in 2025 to share our methodologies and these tools for our Learning Lab with more potential partners. We'll be attending a wide variety of conferences of government associations like the National Association of Counties, the National Governors Association, Chamber of Commerce Association, gatherings to do workshops on collaborative problem solving and have those help us to build partnerships there where people can identify issues that would be right for collaborative problem solving and people that would be interested in the Learning Lab. One piece of the Learning Lab is the book that Rob and I were so blessed, speaking of feeling gratitude, to get a contract with a publisher, Wiley, and to work together with a wonderful editor to release our book this summer, From Conflict to Convergence, which really talks about the methodology that Convergence and some of our other partners, including the Minnesota State Office for Collaboration and Dispute Resolution, whose director, my successor, is on the call today, Katie Pratt, shares that methodology with other leaders who want to apply this approach in their settings. And so Rob and I have been accruing quite a number of frequent flyer miles, traveling around the country, sharing that book, and have found it to be a great tool to engage with our community, many of you, and with potential partners in higher education, government, the private sector. We've recently developed a course guide to help professors use the book in their classrooms and hopefully equip the next generation with more skills and tools for living together successfully and solving problems together in a diverse democracy. So as I hope you can see, myself and the board and the team are all really excited about the momentum that we're building and the projects that we have going on, and making a contribution to this moment in our country when folks are, as we've seen in the election results, divided in the ways that they think about our problems and each other. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. But before we do that, I'm going to ask Monica to come on, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about what we call our pipeline, which are the projects, the collaborative problem solving projects that we are beginning to undertake and tee up for 2025. Monica?
Thanks, Mariah. I'll also out myself and say I was the one who called Mariah out for saying she's grateful for everyone here today. Maybe a little corny, but she actually does mean it. And I was going to say I'm grateful for pickleball, the greatest American pastime. It's not baseball or football, I'm sorry to say. And it was a much better answer than mine. All right, a bit on our pipeline process. I wanted to share kind of 3 buckets of things. One, what are we doing to strengthen how we identify, curate, and kind of nurture early project ideas? What are some of our ongoing discovery and designs? And then what are some projects that we have a bit earlier on in the pipeline, but that we're feeling pretty strong about, that we think something might be able to progress on either of these topics in the coming year. On the pipeline process, as you all know, what the work we do is a bit of an art, a bit of a science, but we are trying to break down how we identify new project ideas to some sort of system. And so we've done a few things here. One is we have established a rigorous set of project selection criteria. So when we look at projects, we look at 3 things. Are they fit and are they ripe for collaborative problem solving specifically? Is there a high potential for impact? And is it fundable? We've also been experimenting with convening groups of experts, connectors, funders, influencers, specifically people who have some influence over the topics that we're considering to help us vet shortlists of potential topics. And we've experimented with a couple of different formats, an advisory group that convenes a bit more often and one-off drill downs. We're leaning towards the latter. We found that has been a bit more effective. And it's been great and just helping us curate and shorten that list further, as well as identify potential funders for a topic, additional people to be speaking with, high potential partners. We've also been having strategic exploratory conversations with relevant stakeholders. So doing kind of mini discovery and designs, nothing as intense as our research and assessment processes, but speaking to one person or a handful of people that have a landscape view of the topic to give us a good lay of that land, potential partners and co-conveners, and also potential funders, not necessarily to immediately pitch a proposal, but we found that having these exploratory introductory conversations, treating them as a thought leader and a thought partner in developing a project really starts buying them into our process and also helps us shape the project in a direction that will make it more fundable. And we've also been experimenting with some of our materials, so developing overviews of a project concept that's not as intensive as a project plan or a full project pitch. And that's been helpful in some of that early socializing that happens as we explore if a project is something that we want to pursue funding for. And lastly, we've been experimenting with forming new and also leveraging existing partnerships within states, state chambers of commerce, state associations of counties. We found those to be quite fruitful. We have an entire state project now, and we're leaning towards state level collaboratives on a few of our other upcoming topics. And that brings me to some of our current projects. I'll focus on 2, one on climate, one on elections. The climate one focuses specifically on siting of renewable energy. So this is how it's decided where a renewable energy projects, especially a wind or a solar farm, get built. What we're seeing is that there are a lot of ambitious climate and energy goals being set by the US on a national level and also within these states. There's a lot of technological advancement happening, a lot of investment happening in renewable energy, and yet we're seeing a rise in local resistance to these projects. And there's some consensus that the number of bans is becoming untenable, but there's not that same consensus. In fact, there's quite a lot of disagreement about how to best address this local resistance, address rural concerns, because they have a lot of valid concerns around property value, aesthetics. They feel exploited by the process often because projects cited in their communities, those energy benefits flow to urban areas. The issue is highly politicized. There's a lot of misinformation. So how can we do something to bridge that urban, rural, state, local divide? And we're exploring now through a series of interviews, what is a solid configuration of partners to pursue a state level project, a state chamber of commerce, a local association of counties, big developers in the region, local associations of landowners, in states that have, or in some state of conversation around policies that balance local and state autonomy when it comes to siting renewable energy, and that also are struggling to stay on their timeline to meet their energy goals. And what we're learning here is some of the highest potential states seem to be Indiana, Iowa, Virginia. We've recently heard Kentucky and South Carolina are high potential options as well. And so the help that we could use from anyone on the call is around if you have any contacts in these states that work on environmental projects, or if you have a sense of people who are interested in providing resources or funding for renewable energy work in the region, that's something that could be useful as well. And I'm also happy to share some of our materials that reflect a little bit more of what we're learning. On elections, we're also in the discovery and design phase. We're speaking to a host of stakeholders across a bunch of different sectors. And the focus here is on the trustworthiness of the election process. So some of you may have seen one of our previous projects on trust in elections that focused more on factors of voter trust, messaging, political communication. Here we're really focusing on the structural integrity of our election system, how it's administered. So the full spectrum of the election life cycle. And what we're trying to do here is identify what are policies, practices, and programs that can help strengthen the trustworthiness of how we administer elections. So far, we've been hearing a few different things, that there is improvement that can be done on ballot processing and reporting. We can improve how we can modernize our election infrastructure, improve our technology, data sharing between states, improve voter list maintenance, strengthen the workforce. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. There was a huge exodus of local election officials after the 2020 election, just due to a lot of safety reasons and harassment. And a few other things we've been hearing is maybe something around bipartisan observation and auditing. There may also be an opportunity on the national level. There are some rumblings about a Republican-led reform to the National Voter Registration Act, and there may be an opportunity for a process such as ours to ensure that any reform that comes is productive and helpful. So some emerging frame seems to be around modernization and more bipartisanship and coordination across states. And we feel that, and we can get into this when we chat about the election, it seems like it may be an opportune time because there are actually a lot of people who maybe wouldn't have trusted the election in 2020. There's a higher level of trust this time. So is there a way to leverage this energy to drive home and further strengthen like the underlying reasons that these elections are trustworthy? Some of our needs here and where this group could be helpful is we're trying to make a decision if this is a state, multi-state, or national level collaborative. So we'd love to hear feedback, input, reflections. We also have an ongoing partnership and funding from an organization called the Election Trust Initiative for this project, but we're also, as we progress with the discovery and design, looking for follow-on funding. So any ideas around people doing work on election administration specifically or democracy strengthening more generally, that would be super helpful as well. And then lastly, I'll make a nod to two of our projects that are earlier on in the pipeline process, and some of you were part of the groups that helped us land on these two topics. But one around housing, specifically innovations to housing affordability and accessibility. We've been hearing a lot of potential in areas such as construction and design innovation, creative financing mechanisms, innovative policies, and we've had some early promising conversations with potential partners. This group called Ivory Homes that runs a housing innovation challenge, and they are also a housing developer in their own right, as well as the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies. And then the second topic on the economic integration of recently arrived immigrants. We're a bit earlier on chatting to experts with that landscape view of the topic. So we're excited to see where both of these progress, especially since they've all gotten kind of that level of validation from our advisory group on economic opportunity. And I'll pause there, hand it back to Mariah to, I think, open it up for a Q&A.
Yeah, we're just gonna open it up. We'd love to have a discussion. Now, welcome your feedback, insights, questions about anything that we've shared, as Monica and others, I think, noted. Particularly keen to hear any advice you have about scoping of our newer projects, the projects in our pipeline, or connections that we might be able to make in the places that we're looking. But would love any feedback, questions, opening it up. Don't make Art start calling on you again.
I've got something, Mariah. It's Rich Korn.
Yeah, please, Rich.
Monica, knowing over the years, how hard it is to, secure funding and really get the right stakeholder table and so on. We've got 4 incredibly important and I think very appropriate projects for us to be in the pipeline to be thinking about. I guess my question is, especially for those folks who are newer to Convergence, how will the decision be made? And at what point do you make the decision to pursue 1 or 2 of these with an organization of 10 or 11 people? We're not going to pursue 3 or 4 of them simultaneously.
So how do we make the decisions which ones we pursue?
Mm-hmm.
So we are working on kind of creating a cycle where we're vetting ideas, knowing how long it takes them to come to fruition, and then giving us the chance to see kind of which ones pick up steam faster based on the partners we're developing, the interest, and the funding that we're able to secure. So for our elections project, we're over the moon that a funder collaborative working on elections came to us with interest in this project. And so that one is teed up to take place in 2025 because we have an arrangement sort of with them that will scope it out through this initial discovery and design phase, and then there'll be funding available for the full project. And we began our climate project kind of before that project, so it's farther along. So we're then planning for that collaborative to begin pending securing funding. We did all the good work to identify the right scope and places, and then we'll move into securing funding with the goal of beginning that collaborative around the middle of 2025. And then the other ones that we mentioned are in earlier phases of development, so they would likely happen later. Although we have sort of a process where we keep the door open depending on when we find the right partners and the right funders that we're able to move forward. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but we kind of keep enough irons in the fire that we can sequence them and move them forward when they're ripe and ready.
I can add to that, Rich. We hope to strengthen some of our state partnerships and some of our existing relationships with funders, so we have a revolving door of people who actually bring ideas to us that we can then vet for how fitting this is for our methodology, so that we're no longer necessarily starting completely from scratch each time. And we also hope that if we curate the right drill down group of connectors, influencers, funders at the top, they can help us connect idea to resource and use that as a bit of a vetting mechanism more efficiently.
Roxy, you had your hand up?
I did. I have 2 kind of unrelated questions. One is about the e-learning. I'd be so excited to see that. Is it going to be available to Leadership Council members to review, to look at, to think about, to use as a tool in our various worlds? That's the first question. And the second question is, I remember we had a project around digital misinformation, and I was curious as to where that was. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So on your first one, yes, 100% to all of that. It'll be ready to start being piloted and tested probably in January, where some of the first modules are ready. There's 5 modules. We're figuring out how we're going to roll that out, but we are going to ask our community to pilot and test it and give us feedback. A number of you have been involved in the development of the content along the way. I don't know if they're here today, but just would shout out Susan and Bruce Edwards played a very big role in helping us develop the concept for the for the whole course, and then the content, but others in the community have as well. But we are hopeful that many of you will want to pilot the course and provide feedback, and then it'll be available in many different formats for use, again, from just e-learning to e-learning with kind of office hours drop in, all the way to the other end of the spectrum being the really robust cohort. And we would love to talk with anyone who thinks you might have a place for it and some of the work that you're doing, a way to use it, to refer people or people that you work with who think might be interested in engaging with the tool, you know, at any of the places along that spectrum. So would really love your help with that.
That sounds great, Mariah. And is it a fee for, will people be buying that course? Not us.
It
but-
will be, but we will use a sliding scale. You know, it's mission aligned for us, of course, to get these skills and tools into the world. And so that's a big part of it. And we do need to diversify our revenue. And so it gives us another tool to make the organization sustainable. And so we'll strike that balance. It'll be a fee-based program, but there'll be a sliding scale. And some of it will be supported philanthropically too. So that cohort that I mentioned with county commissioners, that's supported by the JAMS Foundation, who I think some of you know. So there'll be different ways for folks to access it.
Great, thanks.
On Digidus, you want to take that one, Monica, or you want me to do it?
I can take it and you can add on to me, Mariah. So we had a very interesting group of people land on a very, very interesting set of recommendations, and I'm happy to share that final blueprint in the chat. There's been some minor movement on some of these things, especially driven by one of our stakeholders, Ravi Iyer from the University of Southern California. I think it's Santa Barbara. And he's made some movement in translating some of our recommendations around design innovations to state level policy. I think even in Montana, actually, Mariah. However, it's been a little bit more difficult to have the type of impact that we would have wanted, even though these solutions are so interesting. And we're doing a bit of a post-mortem to figure out why that is. Is it because at the end of the day, the people in the room have to be the business model people? So the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks of X and Meta, and without that, it's hard to make any progress. Or is it something else? But the project has an interesting set of solutions that we're not completely giving up on. Maybe, and quite frankly, not the extent of the impact we would have liked to see.
I think that's true. And we definitely haven't given up. We think they're really smart, interesting, important solutions. And so we're still trying to partner with the folks at the table, and we've still been pursuing funding. There were a bunch of kind of next step projects to try to test and scale some of these solutions that we have not succeeded in securing funding for, but I don't think those problems are going away really soon. So we will keep at it and hope that we'll be able to do more implementation work there.
Thanks. Well, I'd be interested in what the solutions look like when you're ready to share them. So
I'll drop that in the chat right away.
Thanks.
Oh, Cassie, hi.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name's Cassie Lively. This is my first Convergence meeting. I work for a community mediation center in Chicago, and it strikes me that the community mediation centers would be really interested in the e-learning program, either, you know, sort of at any level, but maybe especially in the cohort model. And I think there could be opportunity to partner with NAFCM, maybe on some joint grant funding opportunities to sort of get that in the hands of community mediation centers who do a lot of this work. But, you know, I work for one of the biggest community mediation centers, and we don't have a terribly detailed model for how we get our mediators ready to engage in large group problem solving and conflict resolution. And so it's just sort of like, you have a lot of experience mediating. Let's talk about how we do this when we're working with larger groups. So I think there would be a lot of benefit there.
Cassie, I'm embarrassed that I didn't think of that before now. My first job out of college was at, okay, I always get it wrong because I've worked at so many of the conflict resolution center, the Center for Conflict Resolution, right?
Conflict resolution,
In
yes.
Chicago. My first job, my first place that I entered the field, and Cassie was there, and now she's the executive director of that organization, and it is one of the biggest community mediation centers. So I worked at several of them. So I can't believe I didn't think of that. It's great. And I have often needed folks to develop that skill set in my past job, in particular, new people who had great experience, but not quite all the process steps to work on these public issues. And that was, you know, why I got invested in building this training actually back in my old job at the Minnesota State Office for Collaboration and Dispute Resolution. So I will follow up with you promptly on that. I think you're on the board of NAFCM, right? The National Association for, are you?
My term just ended, but yeah,
okay.
I'm still in close contact with them.
Great. Well, I will be in touch. Thank you for that really good idea. A great way to scale capacity building across the country. Other ideas, questions?
Especially anyone with some historical perspective on how we've surfaced projects in the past and making sure that, like, as insofar as we innovate, we're also taking forward lessons learned from the past.
Also happy to take just any other, if there's other things, we're gonna move in just a second here to our conversation about elections and then about our impact work, but happy to take questions or comments about anything that's on people's minds about Convergence as well. We like to have a good discussion. John?
Hi, everyone. In my own work in the governor's office in New York, I just wanted to quickly say that there's probably quite a lot of overlap between some of the work you all are doing on sort of citing for the green energy technologies and the housing problem. For those of you that are not aware, we made quite a big push 2 years ago to massively reform housing law in the state of New York, and frankly, big chunks of it didn't work all that well, mostly due to significant opposition on local zoning. And so I just wanted to say that, you know, some of sort of the similar local dynamics that you all are running into on things like wind turbines, which of course we've had a lot of both in central New York and out on Long Island, are probably very similar problems that you're going to run into on sort of some of these broader housing proposals. And one, I'm happy to sort of speak at some point about my own experience in this particular issue, and two, just in general, it's a good opportunity for sort of interplay between the two issues.
Yeah, that's right. There's such an interesting theme, I think, about NIMBY and the way that in an effort to really create more opportunities for public participation and engagement, there were some unintended consequences there. And maybe rather than kind of empowering a really wide array of voices, maybe unintentionally empowered, you know, people with only a slice of perspective on these issues. And so I think there's lots of work to be done there. It definitely overlaps between climate and housing, interesting ways that those things play out a little bit differently in urban and rural areas, but we'll absolutely take you up on that, John, and would love to chat more with you about it. Mary Jo.
Thanks, Mariah. So just really impressed with the group, the selection of topics that you're wanting to work on and with your partners. I'm also excited that we have a partner that's that has resources in the area of elections, because so I'm a county commissioner. I'm just immediate past president of our National Association of Counties, and we do elections in this country, and we are of course wanting to do everything we can to help people understand that they're safe and secure, and are wanting to, we're nervous about the federal government wanting to, you know, and what they want to do. So to stay up with that. And I think you're absolutely right that we now have more people that are thinking that our elections were done correctly, and were done, you know, safely and securely and accurately. And so I think it's good that we're going to be looking at ways to reinforce that. And then just grateful for your partnerships with NACO, with the Governors Association, you know, with all these groups that already have these elected officials and staff that are really working on all of these issues, to really go to them. You've been so, the workshops that you do at NACO have been just, you know, full with people that are really interested in these topics. So just want to encourage you to keep, you know, doing that. And thank you for your work in that area, because you know, people in government really are hungry for these tools that you're providing. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jo. We are so appreciative of your role in creating the partnership that we have with NACO, and think there's so much potential there to, you know, scale to bring tools and approaches. County commissioners have been so eager, saying, you know, it's pretty tough to manage these things. We'd love to have skills and resources and tools. And in fact, I think most of you probably know our senior program director, Kit Chalberg, and he's not with us today because he's doing a training for the Oregon Association of Counties on these skills and tools. So glad you're here, Mary Jo. We'll definitely keep you up to speed, definitely planning on engaging county commissioners and NACO in that elections project.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more, Jana.
Hi, Mariah. So my name is Janice Singer. This is my first Convergence meeting. I was so impressed and inspired by the recent book talk that Mariah and Rob gave in Washington, D.C. I'm a retired law professor from an institution that has a dispute resolution program and track for law students, as many law schools do today. And I wonder if those might be potential users and contributors to the e-learning modules. I think law students are more and more interested in collaborative and dispute resolution skills and processes, and I would be more than happy to help try to connect Convergence with folks in the legal academic community who are teaching and writing about dispute resolution.
Thanks so much, Jana. We really appreciate that. Yeah, we know that there's interest there and are so glad to see those programs growing. And, you know, we built this thing sort of for like a general user, and that was a big question for us, is like, should we really target it to one kind of sector or user and tailor it? And so it's going to be interesting for us to learn how that works out. You know, we got a little bit of advice, like if you try to boil the ocean, you know, you won't please anyone, kind of. But we started there because we weren't sure who our big users would be, but we hope that we have kind of the foundation that can then go on to be tailored potentially. So would love to connect with you, and also just shout out Sharon Press, who's here, who's at the Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, that does a lot of, she runs the Dispute Resolution Institute there, and that really has a lot of leadership around how to teach negotiation and collaborative problem solving. So a conversation there would be great too, about the right ways to augment things that are already happening in dispute resolution programs. Thanks, Jenna. All right, well, thank you, everyone. We're going to have several more points of discussion during our time together today, but we're going to transition to our next piece where we'll get to do that in breakout groups. But before we do that, really appreciate people's thoughts and feedback, really eager to follow up with you, Jana and Cassie and John and others. So thank you for those good ideas and connections. And for those of you particularly who are new to us, we really hope that you will keep learning about Convergence, and really welcome you to find a place in our community. So I think my colleagues are sharing more information about how to do that. But Rob First, the founder of Convergence, who's here, we all say that he has a superpower for connecting, and created Convergence to be a place that's all about relationships and our collaborative problem solving approach. What we teach about is all about relationships. So we are so glad that you're here today, and hope that you do become a part of the Convergence family in whatever way makes sense for you. So with that, we're going to move on to spending some time on the election. So we wanted to take a moment just to acknowledge that it's been a very divided and polarized time, certainly in the news. And for those of you who have the disadvantage or advantage of living in swing states, you know, the amount of political ads that we've all had to endure, and the kind of commentary that's been out there, but also for many of us in our personal lives before, and I think for many people after the election, feeling the impact of people's choices in our personal lives. And so we wanted, as a community, to just take a little time and space to be able to reflect together, particularly about what the implications of the elections have or should have for Convergence as an organization, and for all of our approaches to problem solving and bridging our divides, and coming together to solve our shared challenges. So we're going to do that in breakout rooms. Each breakout room will have a board member and a staff person to moderate and take notes, so you can just relax and enjoy the conversation. And when we come back together, we'll hear some highlights from those breakout rooms. But before we head off into those breakout rooms, a couple of our wonderful board members who have different backgrounds and perspectives are going to share a few thoughts on the election and what it might mean for Convergence to seed our conversations in our breakout rooms. So Lindsay.
Right. Thank you so much, Mariah. Hello, everyone. It is wonderful to be back in community with so many of you, especially during this very tense and uncertain time in our history. And I have the privilege of being on the Convergence board, and in my day job, I lead community engagement at a financial trade, helping banks build trust in their communities. So let me just say, it warms my heart that we have so many new people on this meeting. It's wonderful to have you in this in the fold and in this community, which, as you can already tell, is a wonderful, incredible community of change makers. So I think as Mariah and Art acknowledged, I recognize that post-election feelings might still be very raw at this stage. Some of you may be happy, sad, or still processing the results. But I think one thing we can all agree on is that Convergence is made for moments like this. Our mission and our work is particularly salient and important during this polarizing moment. And there's a couple of things I'll offer up about how I think we can meet the moment. The first thing I'll suggest is really what Convergence is already doing, which is facilitating dialogues for people to talk about the election, to have constructive and productive post-election conversations, and to steer it towards how do we create a more collaborative future. I think this is probably the 5th post-election conversation I have had in the last few weeks, and I've recognized that there is a hunger, a desire, an eagerness, as many of you have said, to have a hopeful conversation. And so I really encourage Convergence to lean into this and to continue to serve as a neutral convener, whether that means hosting dialogues with stakeholders that we've worked with in the past, or providing guidance to people on how to host their own conversations. It's really needed. It's really valuable, especially when there's so much uncertainty right now. The second thing I'll mention is I think that there is going to be even greater demand for the learning lab and e-learning approach that Convergence is beginning to lead. I know that I have met with many corporate leaders that are navigating political polarization, and they are really looking for training and resources and knowledge building on collaborative problem solving. And so that's, private sector, that's local government, nonprofit. So I think the Learning Lab has huge potential to really build momentum moving forward. And I really encourage Convergence to build out that work and to leverage all of us as ambassadors for that as well. And then the third thing I think about, and this one I will admit is not fully formed, but I do think that there's a role that Convergence can play in building collaboration on a range of policy issues in Congress. So one of the big takeaways for me in this election is that there were several centrist Democrats that lost their seats. And I know that I've spoken with my own lobbying team who has said that even though there is a Republican majority in Congress, that margin is very tight. So anything that moves in Congress will continue to need bipartisan support. And losing Senator Tester, Senator Sherrod Brown, Senator Casey, who have been in many cases willing to work with Republicans on a number of issues, will be a tremendous loss. So we're facing a Congress that will be more polarized, where there are fewer members that are willing to work across the aisle. And is there a role for Convergence to play in encouraging bridge building and sort of common sense bipartisan solutions in Congress? I don't know, but I raise that up as a question and an opportunity for us to consider. So I'll stop there and turn it back to Mariah.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Really appreciate that. Stuart?
Yes, thank you very much, and welcome to particularly all the newer arrivals, if you like, for the Leadership Council. It's good to see so many of you here. When Art asked us to say what we're grateful for, I actually wrote something to the effect of, I said, I'm grateful to be in my late 70s, have decent health, be an immigrant, and to have, because of that, some perspective on on many events. And I think that's absolutely the case with looking at elections. One of the things I've learned over 40 years of working on public policy here and being involved in the UK in elections and watching the UK and other countries is that elections turn out to be never as good or as bad as you think. It is so common to find that either if you're in despair or in elation, that as you move along, you have to start looking at compromising. You have to start recognizing that you can't do everything you want. So I think that's one thing I will leave with you. The second thing is that, and related to that, is that my observation has been also that sometimes surprising opportunities arise unexpectedly after an election. And just let me give you a little bit of history on one example of that. I worked in the 1980s and early 90s under two Republican administrations a lot on welfare reform, on structural welfare reform. And those of us pushing for that on both sides of the aisle were very frustrated that a Republican administration that talked the talk didn't really move on that. And then somebody called Bill Clinton was elected. And one of the things he said at the very beginning was, we're going to end welfare as we know it. You may remember that, some of you. And the fact is, enormous opportunities arose for people on both sides of the aisle to move forward in an unexpected situation under a Democratic administration. So I'll just give you that as one example. And then I think now as we look at the election results, I can think of particularly a couple of areas where our work could well see fertile ground in the coming months and years. One is the work on strengthening families. We've heard strongly in the election itself and in the campaign the argument that American families had been weakened, and there is a strong interest in looking at tools to build, rebuild, and strengthen American families. Well, we have agreed agendas in that area. I think also the probability that there will be efforts to look at the role of non-governmental institutions as taking the lead in addressing community issues and even national issues, but state issues too. We have, and you'll hear a little bit more about this in a moment, but we have a project looking at how do we bring together organizations from different sectors in the community to strengthen community and family health in this country. The timing is perfect in many respects for building a much wider coalition to move forward in that area. So I'm always accused of being over-optimistic, but I think in this particular situation, it is important to have perspective, to look back and to recognize that all is neither lost nor all is won in this election, and that there will be opportunities to move forward things that are important to Convergence in the way that Convergence operates, by bringing people together. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we will have a very important role in the next few years.
Thank you so much, Stuart. I appreciate the optimism. I think it's important right now for sure. And I'm going to hold on other comments because we do want folks to be able to discuss in their breakouts, and then we'll come back together and have more of a discussion together. But as we go into our breakouts, I know you all know these kinds of reminders, but I always find them useful to say, just reminders to approach the conversation with curiosity, to be listening to learn, to speak from the heart, to give each other the benefit of the doubt. And I think maybe most importantly in this moment, to give each other grace and to give people grace to speak in first draft. As people sometimes say, it's very much true for me that I'm still figuring out how to talk about what's happening in the country and the election. So I know Lindsay said she's been in 5 conversations. Maybe everyone hasn't. So to give folks space to be figuring out how they feel and what they want to say about these topics. So with that, we're going to go into breakout groups for about 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and have a discussion about what you talked about in your breakout groups or anything else related to the election. So team, if you can send folks off, that'd be great.
And so part of what I've been feeling since the election is how grateful I am that I have been a part of Convergence all this time. And I, kind of building on what Stuart said, I was so simpatico with pretty much everything Stuart said. I feel like if we are going to be good practitioners of this space, whether we're doing it in our own families, our communities, or we're in formal convergence processes, or we're ambassadors of convergence, the most important thing is that we are going to embody the principles. And I feel like the next few years is going to give us an incredible opportunity to practice. And, I used to say to people that, wouldn't it be neat if you were watching 2 sports teams and you weren't rooting for one team or the other, you were rooting for excellence. And so it may seem Pollyannish to many people, but part of what Convergence has brought to me is I am going to be listening very deeply and watching very deeply over the next few years where goodness emerges, where excellence emerges, and not so much forming opinions about what the process or the methodology or the philosophy is, but it's like, oh, this politician just did something really cool, and so did this one, and so did this agency, and whatever. And I just feel like Convergence people, we could have an incredible laboratory here over the next few years of, can we really embody the principle of listening for wisdom in everybody, knowing that there will be extremes that are, that are untenable, but that the majority of people want goodness, and they may have some wisdom in the way that they're looking at things. And I think out of that, we could contribute to what Stuart was putting forth, is the idea that some really surprising things could happen. Yeah.
Thank you, Jessica. Amanda.
I love that, Jessica. Thank you for sharing that. In our conversation, we talked, among other things, about the importance of local level conversations, which I know I gather Convergence is starting to do work at the local level, and the importance of doing this with partnerships. I shared my own pre-election experience, which was quite disturbing, I found, actually, in doing canvassing in a rural part of Pennsylvania, the level of intimidation that neighbors felt with respect to their neighbors. I was knocking mostly on blue doors, low propensity voters, and we would have conversations on their porches in hushed tones because they didn't want it known by their neighbors that they were voting a certain way. And that it was palpable, that level of intimidation, that concern, it was frightening to some extent. And so in the sort of now on the other side of that, I think the healing conversations, the ways that we can come together again, regardless of which side you're on, but to be a community and to be supportive of each other is really important. So I'm interested to learn more about the local work that Convergence is taking on. And we did know that with a small organization, it's important. We can't recreate the networks at the local level, but really partner with existing networks to provide the skills and expertise that we have in having those conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Just a quick response to that. For the most part, the most local that we get is state, though not always. We're working in a school district with our collaborative problem solving processes, but with our learning lab and sharing the tools, that can be more local. But I agree with you that we need a lot more opportunities for people to come together in good structured ways that lead to, building trust and relationships and shared understanding. We have time for maybe one more. Anyone else want to get in one more thought there about the election? All right. Well, thank you everyone for engaging in what I think, can be a tough conversation, just given how divided and how many big feelings many people across all perspectives and viewpoints have. So thank you for being here today, and especially for sharing lots of messages and hope. One of the things that we talked about in my breakout was how much change is needed on structural issues to our democracy and our information ecosystem, and all of that is very true. And we in no way think that Convergence, is the only solution to these problems. Very, very many solutions are needed. And given, how very 50-50 the election was, we feel like the Convergence, the collaborative problem solving approach that we and many of our other sister and brother organizations and like-minded folks out there are taking certainly has its place in this moment. It's clear that too many people on all and any side are feeling unseen, unheard, and not valued. And that is something that I think that we are excellent at Convergence, at creating spaces where people of all backgrounds and perspectives are able to be seen, heard, and valued. But we don't stop there. We want to make sure that all of those voices are contributing to making real and lasting change that make people's lives better, which was one among many of the drivers of the election, people are seeming to conclude. And that's a focus of ours at Convergence, really making people's lives better. And so that brings me to the next and I think final section of our agenda today. And that's about the piece of work about how we make people's lives better, about the phase of our work where we continue to support participants in our collaborative problem solving processes who have built relationships, built trust, built a shared understanding of the issues, developed their consensus solutions. And now they're going to work together to advance them and see them implemented so that people's lives can change. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. So part of our theory of change is to demonstrate that a more collaborative future is possible. And we're really able to do that in every one of our projects through the relationships that are built and the blueprint for action, those solutions. There's a statistic that we like to share from Pew that 77% of Americans have few or no friends from the other side of the political aisle. And that is troubling. And so we are able to bring people together across that aisle and across all different kinds of divides, and they reliably build relationships and come up with ideas for how to make things better. That happens every time, as far as I'm aware of. Another part of our theory of change is to foster within participants in the collaboratives the mindsets and those relationships that create the social capital for ongoing collaboration and problem solving. And we know that this is also the case in every one of our collaborative problem solving processes. We hear endless, very touching stories about participants who went on to continue to work together with each other across their differences, to start new projects focused on working across differences in their issue area, working together to advance their solutions. We've even heard stories of participants working together to get federal legislation passed that was only tangentially related to their project. To illustrate that, I just want to share one quick story about what that building that social capital for collaboration looks like. And Rob, I wonder if you'd be willing to jump in and just briefly tell the story of Darren and Mark.
Sure, Mariah. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Great to see everybody. You know, our projects really try to take on some very big issues, but so much is relationally based, and there are all sorts of what our former board chair, Gina Molino, calls radiating impacts that occur that do build social capital in a way we don't anticipate, but lasting impact. So one quick story, and this is in the book, concerns our Reentry Ready project, which was the project about people returning to society from prison. And we knew going in that despite the fact that there's huge differences in the country about the criminal justice system and whether we're over-incarcerated or under-incarcerated and how tough or more lenient we should be on crime, we knew that actually most people would believe that when people are getting out of prison, they should be able to thrive. And that's what the group came together on. However, at the beginning of that project, and I need to tell you, it was one of the tenser first days of any project we've ever had. I don't remember what year it was now, but probably 7 or 8 years ago. We brought to the table a leading academic and practitioner for prison reform by the name of Mark Howard, who's at Georgetown, and he'd written a book very critical of the American prison system writ large, and in particular took special aim at private prisons. I know a lot of people have certain opinions about private prisons, and you know, it's been a big issue in front of the American public. But also at the table, because we felt like, because Convergence wants all the perspectives that are valuable, we wanted to have some private prison representation, because they were doing work, they were important players, and may have had ideas to how to move forward. Anyway, the main story we tell is that we knew that these people would probably never normally be at a table together. And again, the first day was a bit rocky, and then we had dinner that night, and we ended up purposely sitting the academic and the private prison executive next to each other at dinner. And we only learned when we did the book, we spoke to them both individually, that Mark Howard, the academic, before he went to dinner, noticed where his seat was, and went out in the hallway and texted his wife and said, "You can't believe who they're sitting me next to. This is not going to go well," basically, and I can't believe I'm being put in this position. Well, fast forward, by the end of dinner, after they initially only talked to people on the other side of them, they eventually found that they wanted the same things for people getting out of prison. And Darren Swenson from Core Civic said that, you know, they too wanted people to thrive. And they pointed out that Core Civic had diversified their business to also run reentry programs, so that, you know, the common complaint that private prisons were in business to make profits off the suffering of people and keeping them in prisons longer there was an incentive for them to do that, really didn't hold, because they really wanted to move things forward. So by the end of that evening, Mark, the academic, had agreed to visit a private prison in Tennessee. And then he and Darren have formed a strong working partnership. Mark has founded something called the Frederick Douglass Project, now operating in 6 states, where a bunch of his innovative ideas are going forward to help people thrive in prison and when they get out. And basically, what he found was, not all that surprisingly, is that he had trouble getting through a lot of red tape with public prisons, which of course tend to be more bureaucratic, to get his ideas implemented. And then Darren came in and said, "Here, let me help out." So Darren is really helping test a lot of these ideas in private prisons, and their friendship and their ability to work together has ensued all these years afterward. So it's an example of the kinds of things that can happen that, you know, we didn't plan for, but potentially can have deep impacts, not only on the affected people, most importantly in the prisons, but also on how people relate to each other over time after they've sat at our tables.
Thanks, Rob. So we love using stories to illustrate our points. We also have statistics. Our evaluation data tells us that 53% of our participants said that they were willing to partner with someone whose views they didn't agree with before the collaborative, and afterwards it was 90%. So we know that we knock it out of the park when it comes to building relationships, mindsets, and social capital for people to go on to continue to collaborate together. But another piece of our theory of change is about directly improving people's lives. And that's the piece that's the hardest to accomplish. Of course, passing federal policy is very hard. State policy impacting practices of the private sector are hard. But some of our projects have had huge impacts. Many of you are aware of those. Our Education Reimagine project really catalyzed a movement around learner-centered education, a really transformative approach. Our California Health Reform Initiative led to the creation of a state office to address healthcare costs, which is one of the most difficult areas of our healthcare conundrums. Stuart recently shared with me, and maybe when he comes up in a little bit, he'll say more, but he had a project on long-term care financing, which, while not yet adopted in federal policy, continues to be discussed, but a version of it was implemented in Washington state. And of course, one of our earliest projects led to increased healthcare coverage for many Americans. So some of the projects lead to some really great impacts on people's lives, but not always. It hasn't been as much as we wanted, and it's a very challenging thing to do. And so we have really been innovating around that piece of our work. And some of our early projects, and I think some of Rob's original vision, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, was that after we developed the solutions, participants would go out and have them implemented. And that turned out to work in some cases, but not others. And so now we're really planning increasingly for a period of ongoing coordination of the participants' collaboration to advance their solutions. And so in the last couple of years, we've been able to secure funding for a little bit longer runway, a few months at least after the solutions are developed, for kind of a dissemination phase where we share those solutions. We have some grooves that we've developed around launch events and articles and podcasts and briefings and presentations and things like that. But what we know is that getting to the level of policy change will really take some sustained effort to see these solutions really adopted. And from a small nonprofit's perspective, that's challenging to do. And so we've been trying to innovate around having more support for this impact and adoption phase of our work. And so we're really thrilled that thanks to the Packard, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, who are our very generous funders of our Supports for Working Families Collaborative, have continued to support the project by providing an additional year of funding for the participants to continue to meet and to focus not on developing new solutions, but to continue to build those relationships and social capital for problem solving, to identify and respond to emergent opportunities to move their consensus ideas forward, and to work on a few particular aspects of their work that they think they might be able to move forward, including trying to influence tax policy around the child tax credit and some other pieces in the coming federal legislative session. We were so thrilled that that pretty large table of 35 people, almost all of them, have continued to participate with us. And we're looking to replicate and further test this model with our Social Factors of Health project, which released its blueprint and is now working to develop and seek funding for an impact phase similar to what we're doing with our Families project. So I'm going to turn it to Stuart to talk about where we are with our implementation phase on Social Factors of Health. Stuart?
Great, thank you, Mariah. And we're very excited about this project and in terms of its timing and the opportunities. And let me just start by giving you kind of really a thumbnail sketch of kind of what led up to this most recent agreement. It's now generally accepted, I think, in this country that roughly 80% of a person's health status situation is not due to the medical care they receive, but to other things going on in their lives, their housing condition, whether they can easily get to see a doctor, whether they have transportation, all these sorts of issues. 10 years ago, one would have to make the argument for that. But really from about 5 years ago onwards, most organizations, both in the social service area and in healthcare, have really recognized that one needs to look at these upstream factors, the social factors that influence health, if you're going to have a much more effective health system in this country. And really over the last 5 years, I think many of the organizations in healthcare, in social services have come to recognize that we have a system of laws and rules and regulations in this country that were not designed to encourage collaboration across these different sectors: transportation, nutrition, housing, healthcare, and so on. And so we started a project now about almost 2 years ago that brought together key organizations from different sectors. So organizations like Catholic Charities, organizations like United Health and Kaiser Permanente, Meals on Wheels, lots of different organizations like that from different sectors, to say, can we get together and can we agree on what set of changes in laws and regulations and rules would make it most easy for collaboration to occur, for partnerships to occur between these different sectors to deal with these so-called social factors of health. That was the premise of the project. Well, that project got going really last fall, and actually, to me, quite surprisingly, found it quite easy to get to agreement once people listened to each other. What we were doing was what you might call a cross-support model. We would have people in the housing area explain why why changes in the law that they needed were so important and would affect these other sectors as well, particularly health. We had people in the health sector saying why certain fairly arcane changes in payment systems, for example, would be so important to address the housing conditions and other factors at the local level. So the idea was to get them to learn from each other, understand where each sector came from, and agree by learning on a set of recommendations. They did that, and that came out in early October. And if you look at it, you'll see it's a very comprehensive agreement dealing with details at the federal, state in particular, and to some extent at the local level. Now we're looking at and engaged in the implementation phase of moving this forward. And when we think of it of impact and implementation, it's very important to understand that this happens in politics in stages. It's very rare for a report to come out and then people in Congress say, oh, why didn't I think of that? Let's put a bill forward and pass it. And then, isn't that tremendous? It actually takes stages. And we're at the initial stages of looking at how to ensure that our recommendations in this area actually eventually change laws, practice at all levels of government, and move forward in this way. And we're doing this in stages. We have the agreement. The agreement's been very widely sent around and understood, and is in the hands of people within government, outside of government, in different organizations, and so on. What we're now doing is really focusing on what I'll call the infrastructure of change, of creating the momentum of how we move forward, how we set up a continuous inertia in favor of change. And there are several things that we're doing right now that fit into that. We have been working with some of the members of the collaborative to create what is essentially a handbook for state and local officials and organizations as to what they can actually do under existing law to move forward in these areas. We found in our discussions that there was so much uncertainty about what the law said, about what you could do, that we found initiatives really failing to take hold because of uncertainty about what the law actually said. So we're involved in a report that will be coming out, not by Convergence, but thanks to our work, which will be a handbook for state and local organizations and officials as to what they can actually do to work together across sectors to move forward on social factors of health. We're also working with a group of our of the collaborative members who are faith-based organizations. So Catholic Charities, several of the health plans, Common Spirit, and others, and they're forming a coalition of faith-based organizations in health and social services, housing, and so on, to work together kind of permanently to get a number of these proposals put into place. We're just starting that. We got one of our first meetings in December, and we anticipate that this will eventually develop into a very powerful coalition of faith-based organizations to push forward recommendations that came up in the collaborative. We're looking at other areas too. Data sharing is a very important area to ensure that organizations can work together. We find so often that people have different data systems, they literally don't talk to each other, or there are restrictions on sharing data of people who've got or are homeless and have certain medical conditions, or are in school and have certain health conditions. It's very difficult to share that information to allow organizations to work together. And so we are working very closely in that area, and we're going to be holding some sort of multi-sector groups focused on that area of data. And then last but by no means least, as Mariah mentioned, we know that in the United States, we are a federalist system, and lots of issues can move forward and do move forward at the state or the county or local level. And we're looking at working with a number of our collaborative members on one or two, at the moment, possible pilots at a county or city level. The District of Columbia is one possibility of that. Mariah mentioned that that's exactly what happened in one of our earlier projects on long-term care insurance, where a couple of states, in particular Washington State, has now created a long-term care initiative at its level and a program in place that people pay into and get a degree of protection against long-term care costs. And we're looking at the same kind of thing in this area of social factors of health, of working with a state or a city in that area. So a lot of things are moving along. We are raising money for this phase. We have some that is money that was collected for our initial phase, but now we are working hard to flesh out these steps by raising money and enabling the organization, our team, to work in these different areas.
Thank you so much, Stuart. So this is a big topic for us at Convergence, how to make sure that we get the most out of all of the relationships and ideas that are developed. And so you'll be hearing more about that from us, and we would love to hear more from you about that. So any ideas that you have about how to continue to advance our social factors of health work, funding partners, implementation partners, people who would be interested, as well as all of our other projects, please do reach out to us. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Art to close us out, because I would not be a good professional facilitator if I didn't end the meeting on time. Art?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank all of you for participating in our session today. You know, Convergence is a community that we intend to grow. And it was so delightful to see so many new people participating in this meeting today. And for all of you who understand how these meetings go, we're always interested in continued feedback and further engagement through non-meeting related activities. So you can always reach out to us via email, reach out to us via phone, schedule opportunities to talk with us if you have other ideas. and introduce Convergence to other members of your family and community so they can be a part of this. The other thing I wanted to point out is that Convergence is, like many organizations, very dependent on individual contributions. These are the funds that give us the flexibility to create programs and to further our work nationally so that we can do what we've been talking about here during this meeting. So if you haven't made a contribution to Convergence, I hope you will consider that. This is the time when most organizations can be up to 1/3 of their budgets during this period of time, and Convergence is no different. So I hope you'll consider making a gift. If you've already made a gift and you happen to be one of these people who have made a whole ton of money during this period of time in the stock market, the prices have gone through the roof, maybe you want to share some of those winnings with Convergence. And lastly, I just wanted to say that we have a survey that we'd like you to take a minute to fill out just to give us some sense of how today has gone. And please stay in touch with us. Find a way to connect. There's a couple of you I've already met that I know that the board would love to talk to about different projects and needs that we have. So stay connected, and I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you back here at the next Convergence meeting where you can continue to contribute and support us. Thank you.